A black boy ran into a burning car to save a trapped pregnant woman. But the next day, a black SUV showed up with a shocking proposal. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The smell of motor oil clung to Jamal Williams' work clothes as he checked his phone for the third time in an hour. The mechanic shop's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the engine he'd been repairing. "Everything all right, Williams?" Marco, his supervisor, called from across the garage. "That transmission ain't gonna fix itself." "Sorry." Jamal tucked the phone away, but the worry remained. "My grandmother's medication isn't working like it should. The nurse said she'd call if anything changed." Marco's expression softened. "Take off early if you need to. Just finish Mrs. Peterson's oil change first." Jamal nodded gratefully. At 23, he was the youngest mechanic at River City Auto, but also one of the most reliable. He'd been working there since high school, sacrificing college dreams to care for his grandmother after her COPD diagnosis. As he finished the oil change, his phone vibrated. The nurse's voice was tight with concern. "Your grandmother's having a difficult day, Jamal. Her oxygen levels dropped twice this morning. The doctor wants to adjust her medication, but..." The unspoken issue hung between them. Money. Always money. "I'll be there soon," Jamal said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Tell her I'm coming." The autumn air was crisp as he walked to his battered Honda. The hospital was 20 minutes away if traffic cooperated. He checked his wallet. $43 wouldn't cover much of whatever new medication they prescribed. 3 blocks from the shop, Jamal slowed as traffic backed up at an intersection. The sound reached him before he saw anything. The unmistakable crunch of metal hitting metal at high speed, followed by screams. A silver sedan had run a red light and T-boned a smaller blue car, which spun and slammed into a light pole. Even from a distance, Jamal could see the hood crumpling, smoke beginning to rise from the engine compartment. People stood frozen on the sidewalk, phones out, recording instead of helping. The silver sedan's driver stumbled out, dazed and bleeding from a head wound, but the blue car's driver remained inside. Without conscious thought, Jamal pulled to the curb and ran toward the scene. The smoke from the blue car had darkened, thin flames licking around the edges of the crushed hood. "Call 911!" he shouted at the bystanders as he approached the wreckage. The smell of gasoline was strong, too strong. Through the cracked driver's window, Jamal saw a woman slumped against the steering wheel. Her eyes were closed, a streak of blood running down her forehead. The airbag had deployed but had already deflated. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Jamal tried the door handle, but the frame had warped, jamming it shut. The flames were growing, climbing toward the windshield. A sudden movement caught his eye. The woman's hand, resting protectively over a clearly pregnant belly. "Oh, God," Jamal whispered. He tried the door again, pulling with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. Time seemed to slow. The fire was spreading faster now, smoke billowing around the car. In the distance, sirens wailed, but they wouldn't arrive in time. Jamal knew what gasoline fires could do. He'd seen enough destroyed engines to understand how quickly the fuel tank could ignite. He grabbed a tire iron from his car and smashed the passenger window. Glass rained over the unconscious woman as Jamal cleared the frame and reached across to release her seatbelt. Come on," he muttered, struggling to maneuver her body. She was dead weight in his arms, her pregnancy making the awkward angle even more difficult. The heat was intense now, scorching his skin. Smoke filled his lungs, making him cough and his eyes water. With a final surge of effort, Jamal pulled the woman through the window, cradling her as gently as possible while moving as quickly as he could. His arms burned with the strain as he carried her away from the vehicle. "Someone help me!" he shouted. And finally 2 bystanders ran forward, helping Jamal lower the woman safely to the ground. Not 10 seconds later, a whoosh of igniting fuel sent flames shooting skyward as the car's tank exploded. The blast knocked several onlookers off their feet, and heat washed over them in a terrible wave. Paramedics arrived moments later, quickly taking over. One checked the woman's vitals while another placed an oxygen mask over her face. "She's pregnant," Jamal told them, his voice raw from smoke. A police officer approached, notebook in hand. "You the one who pulled her out?" Jamal nodded, suddenly aware of the burning sensation on his forearms where the flames had singed him. "Name?" "Jamal Williams," the officer scribbled in his notebook. "You probably saved 2 lives today, Mr. Williams. Not many would have gone near that car." Jamal watched as they loaded the woman into the ambulance. "Will she be okay?" "Too soon to tell, but thanks to you, she's got a chance." The officer handed him a card. "We'll need a statement later, but you should get those burns checked out first." Jamal glanced at the card, then at his watch. His grandmother would be waiting. "I will, later." By the time Jamal reached his apartment, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving him exhausted and in pain. The burns on his arms weren't severe, but they stung fiercely. His clothes reeked of smoke. A harsh coughing fit greeted him as he opened the door. His grandmother was hunched in her favorite chair, an oxygen tank at her side, tissue spotted with blood clutched in her thin hand. "Grandma, I'm here." Jamal rushed to her side, adjusting her oxygen cannula. "You're late," she wheezed, then noticed his appearance. "Lord, child, what happened to you?" "Car accident." "Not mine," he quickly added, seeing her expression. "I helped someone, that's all." He went to the kitchen sink, washing the soot from his arms and wincing as the cool water hit his burns. On the counter, he counted out her pills for the evening, arranging them beside a glass of water. The pile seemed to mock him. Little capsules of life, each one costing more than they could afford. The doctor wanted to add another medication to the regimen, something to reduce the inflammation in her lungs, something not covered by their insurance. "You need to take these now," he said, helping her with the pills, "and I'll make some soup." As Jamal opened a can of chicken noodle, the TV in the living room switched to the evening news. He heard his own name and froze. Heroic rescue by local mechanic Jamal Williams, who pulled a pregnant woman from her burning vehicle just moments before it exploded. A shaky cell phone video played, showing Jamal dragging the woman through the window as flames licked at the car. The footage cut to the explosion, the fireball lighting up the screen. His grandmother called weakly from the living room. "Jamal? Is that you they're talking about?" He carried the soup to her, setting it on the side table. "It's nothing, Grandma. Just did what needed doing." She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the reddened skin on his arm. "Could have gotten yourself killed." "I'm fine." He forced a smile. "How was your day? Did the nurse change your oxygen settings like the doctor asked?" She nodded, but another coughing fit interrupted whatever she was about to say. Jamal held her shoulders until it subsided, noting with concern the increased frequency of these episodes. After dinner, Jamal sat at the kitchen table, bills spread before him like a losing hand of cards. The rent was due next week. The electricity bill had a past due notice stamped across it, and now they needed another $300 for the new prescription. A knock at 2. The door interrupted his calculations. Mrs. Garcia from next door stood in the hallway, her 9-year-old son peeking around her legs. "Jamal, we saw you on the news. My Mateo says you're a superhero now." She beamed, pushing her son forward. "Tell him, Mateo." The boy stared up at Jamal with undisguised awe. "Did the car really explode? Was there fire everywhere? Were you scared?" "Mateo," his mother scolded. "That's not what we came to say." Jamal crouched down to the boy's level. "It was just a car, buddy. And yeah, I was scared. But sometimes you do things even when you're scared because they need doing." After they left, promising to bring over a casserole tomorrow, Jamal's phone rang. The hospital was calling. Someone wanted to know if he could visit the woman he'd rescued. "I'm sorry," he said, watching his grandmother struggle to breathe across the room. I can't leave right now. Are they okay? Both mother and baby are stable, the nurse assured him. She just wanted to thank you personally. Maybe another time. He ended the call, turning back to the bills. His grandmother's voice startled him. You should go. Meet the woman you saved. And leave you here alone not happening. Jamal gathered the bills into a pile. Besides, being famous doesn't pay these. She shook her head slowly. Always were stubborn, like your mama. The comparison stung. His mother had been gone for 15 years now, lost to the same addiction that had taken his father even earlier. His grandmother had raised him since he was 8, working 2 jobs until her health failed. Now it was his turn to be the provider, the protector, and he was barely keeping them afloat. As they prepared for bed, another fit of coughing doubled his grandmother over. Jamal supported her weight, fear clutching at his chest as he watched her struggle for breath. We're getting that new medication tomorrow, he decided. I'll figure out the money somehow. She nodded weakly, too exhausted to argue. As he helped her into bed, adjusting her oxygen tube, Jamal's mind raced through options. He could ask for more hours at the shop, maybe sell his car and take the bus, or finally give in and apply for that payday loan with the terrible interest rate. Back in the kitchen, he opened a can of soup for himself, the bills still waiting on the table. The newscast had moved on to other stories, but his phone kept lighting up with messages from friends who'd seen the report. Hero, they called him. If only they knew how powerless he felt right now. A sharp, authoritative knock at the door interrupted his dinner. It was nearly 10 p.m., too late for casual visitors. Probably Mrs. Garcia with that promised casserole, though the knock had been too firm for her. Jamal opened the door to find a man in an expensive suit standing in the hallway. Tall and commanding, with steel gray hair and cold eyes behind designer glasses. Behind him stood 2 broad-shouldered men in dark clothing, their posture suggesting they weren't just along for company. Mr. Williams? The suited man's voice was cultured, confident. My name is Thomas Blackwood. I believe you saved my wife's life today. May I come in? We have something very important to discuss. Jamal hesitated, his hand gripping the doorknob tightly. The trio before him looked like they'd stepped out of a movie, the kind where people like him usually ended up in trouble. But the mention of the woman he'd rescued made him step aside. Please come in, Mr. Blackwood. Thomas Blackwood strode into the modest apartment with the confidence of someone accustomed to much grander spaces. His eyes scanned the cramped living room, the worn furniture, the medical equipment beside his grandmother's chair, the stack of bills on the kitchen table, and a flicker of distaste crossed his face before his professional mask returned. The 2 men remained by the door, standing with their hands clasped before them, watching Jamal's every move. I won't take, much of your time, Blackwood said, remaining standing as though sitting might somehow contaminate him. I wanted to personally thank you for what you did today. Rebecca is everything to me. Rebecca. Jamal repeated the name, putting a human face to the unconscious woman he'd pulled from the wreckage. Rebecca Thompson, my wife. Blackwood's voice was controlled, almost rehearsed. The doctors say both she and our unborn child will recover thanks to your intervention. A harsh coughing erupted from the bedroom. Blackwood's eyebrow raised slightly as the sounds of Jamal's grandmother in distress filled the small apartment. Your grandmother, I presume. I've taken the liberty of researching you, Mr. Williams. Orphaned at 8. Raised by your maternal grandmother. Employed at River City Auto for the past 5 years. No criminal record. 1 semester of community college before dropping out. He recited these facts clinically, like reading ingredients from a label. Jamal shifted uncomfortably. I should check on her. In a moment. Blackwood raised his hand, a subtle command to stay put. The Thompson family values its privacy, Mr. Williams. Rebecca's condition, her pregnancy, is a private matter. The media attention surrounding your heroic act has been problematic. I didn't talk to any reporters, Jamal protested. Someone just filmed it and I'm aware. Nevertheless, the situation requires management. Blackwood set his leather briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open. The Thompson name carries significant weight in business circles. Rebecca's pregnancy has been difficult, and her doctors insist she remain stress-free for the duration. From the briefcase, Blackwood removed a thick manila envelope and a multi-page document bound with a silver clip. I'm prepared to compensate you generously for your heroism and your discretion. He handed the envelope to Jamal, who opened it hesitantly. Inside was more cash than he'd ever seen in one place. Stacks of $100 bills neatly arranged. $50,000, Blackwood stated. Tax-free. Enough to cover your grandmother's medical needs and your education should you choose to return to college. Jamal stared at the money, his mind racing. It was the solution to every problem currently crushing him. The rent, the medical bills, the prescription his grandmother desperately needed. It was freedom from the daily grind of barely surviving. What's the catch? He asked, looking up from the envelope. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Merely your signature on this confidentiality agreement. He pushed the document forward. It stipulates that you will not discuss the accident with the media, on social media, or with anyone outside your immediate family. Most importantly, you agreed not to contact Rebecca Thompson, now or in the future. Why wouldn't I be allowed to? Rebecca's condition is delicate. Her physicians have advised against any emotional disturbances. Reminders of the accident could trigger complications. Blackwood's tone brooked no further questions. The agreement is standard legal procedure for situations involving the Thompson family. Another bout of coughing from the bedroom, longer and more severe than the last. Jamal glanced anxiously toward the sound. I need to help my grandmother. Of course. Blackwood pushed a pen across the table. Sign first. 3 places marked with tabs. Then see to her needs. Jamal felt trapped between responsibility and suspicion. The money would save his grandmother's life. The prescription alone cost hundreds they didn't have, not to mention the oxygen tanks, the specialized care. With a deep breath, he picked up the pen. The coughing from the bedroom had become more desperate. All 3 places, Blackwood reminded him as Jamal flipped through the document, signing where indicated, without reading the dense legal text. As soon as he finished, Blackwood smoothly collected the document, tucked it into his briefcase, and nodded toward the envelope of cash still on the table. That's yours now. I suggest investing in better medical care for your grandmother. The night nurse from Blessed Grace Services is particularly good. Tell them I sent you. The coughing had subsided into wheezing gasps. Jamal clutched the envelope, torn between seeing his visitor out and rushing to help. One last thing, Blackwood said, his hand on the doorknob. The agreement is legally binding. Violation carries severe penalties, financial and otherwise. Do we understand each other? Jamal nodded, the weight of what he'd just done settling uncomfortably on his shoulders. Good evening, Mr. Williams. I don't expect we'll meet again. With that, Blackwood and his silent escorts left, closing the door behind them. Jamal rushed to his grandmother's room, helping her sit up and adjusting her oxygen flow. Her breathing gradually steadied, but the fear in her eyes remained. Who was that man? She asked weakly. Someone grateful for what happened today. Jamal showed her the envelope. Grandma, we can get your medicine now, all of it, and maybe look into that new treatment the specialist mentioned. Her eyes widened at the sight of the money. Child, what did you do? Nothing wrong, he assured her, though doubt nagged at him. I just promised not to talk about the accident or contact the woman I helped. Small price to pay for getting you better, right? She reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Nothing comes free in this world, Jamal. You remember that. An hour later, Jamal had already been to the 24-hour pharmacy and returned with his grandmother's new prescription. The medication was expensive, $300 for a month's supply, but he'd paid without wincing, the weight of the remaining cash still heavy in his pocket. As he helped his grandmother take the first dose, a knock at the door announced Michael's arrival. His friend wore scrubs from his shift at Memorial Hospital, his normally cheerful face drawn with fatigue. "Heard you became a local hero while I was changing bedpans," Michael said, collapsing onto the couch. "They showed the video during break. Man, that was intense." Jamal set a cup of coffee before his friend. "It happened so fast I barely remember it." "Well, the whole hospital's talking about it. Rebecca Thompson is in the private wing, tight security and everything." Michael sipped his coffee. "She's stable, but they're monitoring the baby round the clock." "You've seen her?" "Nah, I'm just in the ER. But Tasha from maternity filled me in. Said the woman's been asking about you. Wanted to thank her rescuer personally." Michael's eyes drifted to the envelope of cash on the table. "Whoa, what's that? You rob a bank while you were at it?" Jamal quickly tucked the envelope away. "A thank you gift. From her husband." "Husband?" Michael's brow furrowed. "That's weird." "Why is it weird? Guy's probably loaded, wanted to show appreciation." "Because Rebecca Thompson doesn't have a husband. Not anymore." Michael leaned forward. "She's a widow, man. Has been for months. I was on duty when they brought her in after his death. Food allergy or something. It was all over the hospital grapevine because of who they are." Jamal felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. "No, that can't be right. The guy who was just here, Blackwood, he said he was her husband." "Thomas Blackwood?" Michael's eyes widened. "Yeah, I've heard of him. He's her brother-in-law. Super rich, super connected, but definitely not her husband." Jamal retrieved the envelope, opening it to show Michael. "He gave me this to sign a confidentiality agreement. Said I couldn't contact her, ever." Michael whistled at the sight of the cash, then frowned. "That doesn't make sense. Why would he stop you from meeting her when she's been asking about you?" "He said reminders of the accident could complicate her condition." "That's bull. Tasha said she was fully conscious this morning, specifically requesting to meet you. Said she seemed anxious about it, like it was important." Jamal pulled out the copy of the agreement he'd been given, scanning the dense legal text. Phrases jumped out at him. "Penalties including but not limited to financial restitution. Prohibition of all contact. Violation constitutes authorization for protective measures." "This feels wrong," he muttered. "You think?" Michael took the document, flipping through it. "Why would someone pay you 50 grand to stay away from a woman who wants to thank you? Something's not adding up." Jamal paced the small living room, his mind racing. He knew everything about me, where I work, about Grandma's condition. How? "Money opens doors," Michael said grimly, "but so does desperation." He looked at Jamal seriously. "What if we just go see her? I can get you into the hospital. She's on the 3rd floor, private suite. I signed the agreement." "To hell with the agreement. This is sketchy as hell, man." Michael stood up. "Look, I've got a shift tomorrow morning. Come in as a custodial worker. I can swipe you a uniform and badge. We get you 5 minutes with her, see what's what. Then you decide if the money's worth it." Jamal glanced toward his grandmother's room. The new medication seemed to be helping already. Her breathing had eased into a peaceful rhythm for the first time in weeks. "I need this money, Mike. I can't risk losing it. And what if there's something worse going on? What if that car accident wasn't an accident?" Michael's voice dropped. "Rich people problems never stay simple, Jay. And they never include the little guy in the solution." Jamal sank onto the couch, torn between obligation and instinct. "Let me think about it." "Don't think too long." Michael gathered his things to leave. Tasha said Rebecca seemed scared. Not just accident scared, but like looking over her shoulder scared. At the door, Michael turned back with one last comment that sent a chill down Jamal's spine. "Dude, you said the guy who was here claimed to be her husband, right? No way that makes sense. Rebecca Thompson's husband died 6 months ago. I was there when they brought him in." The autumn sun had barely crept over the horizon when Jamal pulled into the employee parking lot behind Memorial Hospital. His stomach churned with equal parts anxiety and determination as he spotted Michael waiting by the service entrance, a folded gray uniform tucked under his arm. "Thought you might bail," Michael said, handing over the janitor's uniform and a badge with the name Carlos printed beneath a photo that looked nothing like Jamal. "Still not sure this is a good idea." Jamal glanced at the badge. "This doesn't even look like me." Michael shrugged. "Security doesn't look twice at custodial staff. We're invisible. Just keep your head down, don't make eye contact, and push the cart like you've got somewhere important to be." They slipped through the service entrance, where Michael had disabled the camera for maintenance, and into a small supply closet where Jamal changed into the gray uniform. It was a size too large, the sleeves hanging past his wrists, but it would do. "Rebecca's in the VIP suite on the 3rd floor, East Wing," Michael explained, attaching a walkie-talkie to Jamal's belt. "I've got a shift in the ER, but I'll monitor the security channels. If anyone questions you, just say you're covering for Carlos, who called in sick. Channel 3 if you need me." Jamal nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. "How will I find her room?" "East Wing has only 4 VIP suites. The one with the guard outside is hers." Michael checked his watch. "Shift change is happening now. New guard won't recognize the old staff. Perfect timing." Pushing a cleaning cart filled with supplies, Jamal made his way through the hospital corridors. Michael was right. No one gave him a second glance. Doctors rushed past with charts, nurses huddled at stations. Discussing patients, visitors wandered with coffee cups and worried expressions. No one noticed the janitor keeping his head down. The elevator to the 3rd floor seemed to take an eternity. With each floor, Jamal questioned his decision. $50,000 sat hidden in his apartment. His grandmother was breathing easier thanks to the new medication. Why risk it all for a woman he'd saved but didn't know? The answer came unbidden, because something wasn't right, and he couldn't ignore it. The 3rd floor was noticeably quieter, its hallways carpeted, the fluorescent lighting replaced with softer wall sconces. This was where the wealthy recovered, in private rooms with views of the city and amenities that most patients couldn't imagine. As Jamal pushed his cart toward the East Wing, voices echoed from around the corner. He slowed, positioning himself to peek past a large potted plant. Thomas Blackwood stood at the nurse's station, immaculately dressed in another expensive suit, his back rigid with tension. Across from him, a middle-aged doctor in a white coat held a chart protectively against his chest, his expression professionally neutral but clearly strained. "I don't care about hospital protocol," Blackwood was saying, his voice cutting through controlled. "My sister-in-law's condition requires absolute privacy. No visitors except myself. Is that understood?" The doctor didn't flinch. "Mr. Blackwood, while I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Thompson has specifically requested to see the young man who saved her. As her physician—" "As her legal guardian," Blackwood interrupted. "I'm making medical decisions on her behalf. The pregnancy is high risk. Any emotional distress could trigger complications." "She seems more distressed by not seeing him," the doctor countered. "And I've reviewed her file thoroughly. There's no documentation of you being appointed her legal guardian." Blackwood's posture shifted subtly, a predator adjusting its stance. "The paperwork is being processed. Until then, I hold her medical power of attorney." He reached into his jacket, producing a folded document. "This should clarify matters." The doctor reluctantly took the paper, scanning it with a frown. "This appears to be in order, but I still believe—" "Your beliefs are irrelevant, doctor. What matters is your compliance. Blackwood checked his watch. I have a meeting downtown. No one enters her room while I'm gone. No one. Jamal pressed himself against the wall as Blackwood stormed past, followed by one of the same silent men who had accompanied him to Jamal's apartment. Neither noticed the janitor studying the floor, as if a particularly troublesome stain had appeared. When they disappeared into the elevator, Jamal continued toward the east wing, heart hammering against his ribs. The doctor's resistance gave him hope. Rebecca was asking for him, just as Michael had said. But Blackwood's claim of legal guardianship? That was new and deeply concerning. At the end of the hallway, a security guard sat beside a door, scrolling through his phone with obvious boredom. The nameplate beside the door read simply, Thompson. Jamal approached with his cleaning cart, keeping his movements casual. "Morning," he mumbled to the guard. "Need to change the trash and mop." The guard barely looked up. "Make it quick. She's resting." Jamal nodded, surprised at how easy it was. He pushed the cart into the room, quietly closing the door behind him. The private suite was larger than his entire apartment, with a sitting area, a massive TV mounted on the wall, and a hospital bed positioned near the window. The lights were dimmed, but sunlight filtered through partially closed blinds. In the bed lay Rebecca Thompson, her dark hair spread across the pillow, an IV line running to her arm. Her face was pale except for a dark bruise along her cheekbone and a healing cut across her forehead. One hand rested protectively over her swollen belly, rising and falling with her steady breathing. For a moment, Jamal froze. She was asleep. He should leave, try again later, not disturb her. "I'm not asleep," Rebecca said softly, her eyes still closed. "Just trying to decide if you're here to help me or hurt me." Jamal stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Jamal Williams. I pulled you from the car." Her eyes opened, startlingly blue against her pale skin, and fixed on him with an intensity that made him step back. "Jamal," she whispered, relief washing over her features. "You came. I was beginning to think he'd gotten to you too." "If you mean Thomas Blackwood, he did. Sort of." Jamal moved closer, nervously glancing at the door. "He came to my apartment, gave me money to sign an agreement saying I wouldn't contact you." Rebecca struggled to sit up, wincing as she moved. Jamal hesitated, then helped adjust her pillows, noticing as he did that the bruises on her arms didn't match what he'd expect from the car accident. They were finger-shaped, like someone had gripped her too tightly and in various stages of healing. "Thomas gave you money to stay away from me?" Her voice trembled with something between fear and anger. "How much?" 50,000. "And yet you're here." She studied him with those penetrating blue eyes. "Why?" Jamal shifted uncomfortably. "My friend works here. He said you were asking for me and that Thomas isn't your husband like he claimed. Said he's your brother-in-law." Rebecca's face hardened. "He's not my husband. David, my husband, died 6 months ago." Her hand tightened on the sheet. "Thomas is his older brother, and he's been trying to control everything since David died. The company, the estate, and now me and my baby. He told the doctor he's your legal guardian, has your medical power of attorney." "That's impossible," Rebecca hissed, then glanced worriedly at the door. "I never signed anything giving him authority. He's been keeping me isolated, controlling who I see, what medication I receive." Her voice dropped even lower. "Jamal, that car accident wasn't an accident. The brakes failed completely on a car that had just been serviced at his company's shop." A chill ran down Jamal's spine. "Are you saying he's trying to kill me?" Rebecca grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her nails digging into his skin. "Or induce a premature labor that would endanger the baby. If both of us die, he inherits everything as the baby's only living relative. If just I die and the baby survives, he becomes the guardian, and controls the trust until my child turns 25. Why would he want you dead? How much money are we talking about? The Thompson Group is worth over $2 billion, Rebecca said flatly. David left 70% of the shares to me and our child. Thomas only received 15%, with the rest going to minor shareholders. Jamal felt the floor tilt beneath him. Billions. The kind of money people killed for in movies, not in real life. I should go to the police, he said. Rebecca's grip tightened. With what evidence? Thomas has the police chief in his pocket. They play golf together. The detective assigned to investigate the car accident is his former brother-in-law from his first marriage. Her eyes welled with tears. No one believes me. They think I'm a hysterical pregnant widow. The only person who took me seriously was my regular doctor, and Thomas had him removed from my case 2 days ago. What can I do? Help me get out of here, she pleaded. Today, Thomas has arranged for a specialist to examine me this afternoon. I don't trust whatever they're planning to do. Before Jamal could respond, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Pulling it out, he saw a text message from an unknown number. The screen showed a photo of the interior of his apartment, his kitchen table with the cash spread across it, his grandmother's medication bottles, the oxygen tank beside her favorite chair. The image had been taken recently. The digital clock on now, the microwave showed a time just 15 minutes ago. The message beneath the photo made his blood run cold. I know where you are. Your grandmother is alone now. The world blurred past as Jamal sprinted through the hospital corridors, abandoning all pretense of being a janitor. The cleaning cart stood forgotten on the 3rd floor as he dodged nurses and visitors, the phone with its threatening message clutched in his hand. Excuse me, he shouted, nearly colliding with an elderly man pushing an IV stand. The guard at Rebecca's door had barely registered his hasty exit, too engrossed in his phone to notice or care. The elevator was too slow. Jamal burst into the stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The image of his apartment, of someone standing there taking photos while his grandmother sat vulnerable and alone, drove him forward with frantic energy. He burst through the hospital's main doors and sprinted to his car, fumbling with the keys as he tried to call home. No answer. His grandmother's hearing wasn't what it used to be. She might not hear the phone. Or worse, she couldn't answer it. Traffic seemed deliberately against him, red lights stretching into eternity, other drivers moving with infuriating caution. Jamal swerved around them when he could, ignoring honking horns and angry gestures. None of it mattered. Only reaching home mattered. When he finally pulled up to his apartment building, he noticed immediately that something was wrong. The front door stood slightly ajar, the frame splintered near the lock. He bounded up the stairs, heart hammering against his ribs, and burst into the apartment. Grandma, he called, rushing to her bedroom. She sat in her chair by the window, oxygen cannula in place, but her hands trembled violently as she clutched her rosary beads. Her eyes, wide with fear, fixed on Jamal as he entered. He was here, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hiss of the oxygen tank. A man. Came in without knocking. Jamal knelt beside her chair, checking her pulse, her breathing, looking for any sign of injury. Did he hurt you? What did he do? She shook her head slowly. Just talked. Said we have 2 days to leave. Her gnarled fingers gripped Jamal's wrist with surprising strength. Said he knows what you did at the hospital. Said there would be consequences. Jamal's gaze swept the apartment, noting subtle signs of intrusion. Drawers partially open, papers shifted on the table, the envelope of cash undisturbed but clearly moved from where he'd hidden it. A white envelope sat prominently on the kitchen counter, his name written across it in bold black letters. Inside was an official-looking letter, the Thompson Group logo embossed at the top. Notice of eviction. To Jamal Williams and occupants, Re 1342, Parkview Apartments, Unit 3BC. Please be advised that ownership of the property at the above address has transferred to Blackwood Holdings, a subsidiary of the Thompson Group. All existing lease agreements are hereby terminated under Clause 7.3 of your rental agreement, Transfer of Ownership. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. Any belongings remaining after this period will be considered abandoned property. Regards, Legal Department, Blackwood Holdings. Beneath the typewritten text was a handwritten note. Agreements have consequences. This is your only warning. Jamal sank into a chair, the eviction notice hanging limp in his hand. How is this possible? They can't just throw us out. His grandmother's weary eyes met his. What did you do, child? What agreement? Before he could answer, his phone rang. Michael calling from the hospital. Jay, what happened? You just disappeared. The guard said you ran out like the place was on fire. Jamal explained about the threatening text and what he'd found at home. Michael's voice tightened. This is getting dangerous, man. These people aren't playing games. You need to talk to someone who knows. The law. What law? This guy owns half the city from the sound of it. Not Professor Harrison, Michael said firmly. He doesn't own anything but books and that ugly sweater he always wears, and he loves sticking it to rich people who abuse the system. The law professor from community college, I haven't seen him in years. He still asks about you. Says you were one of his most promising students before you dropped out. Michael paused. He does pro bono work for cases he finds interesting. Pretty sure a billionaire trying to kill his pregnant sister-in-law would qualify. The next morning, Jamal arrived at the garage to start his shift, determination overshadowing his exhaustion. He'd spent most of the night researching eviction laws and calling relatives who might be able to take in his grandmother temporarily. None had room for her medical equipment. Marco met him at the entrance, his usually friendly face solemn. Office now. Jamal followed his supervisor to the small glass-walled office at the back of the garage. Mr. Peterson, the owner, sat behind the desk, a folder open before him. Sit down, Williams, Peterson said without looking up. Jamal complied, a knot forming in his stomach. Peterson had never been anything but fair to him, but the man's expression was stone. We've had a complaint, Peterson began, finally meeting Jamal's eyes. A very serious complaint from one of our corporate clients. What kind of complaint, sir? Peterson slid a paper across the desk. It was a detailed inventory list with several items highlighted, expensive parts for luxury vehicles. Next to it sat a grainy security camera photo of someone who, from a distance, could be mistaken for Jamal, removing something from a storage cabinet. They're saying I stole parts? Jamal couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. That's not me in that photo. And I've never taken anything. The Thompson Group is our biggest client, Williams. They maintain their entire fleet with us. This came directly from their head of security. Peterson sighed heavily. I've known you since you were in high school. I don't believe you'd do this, but they're threatening to pull all their business if we don't take immediate action. So you're firing me. It wasn't a question. I'm sorry, son, my hands are tied. Peterson pushed an envelope across the desk. 2 weeks' pay, best I can do. Jamal stood, legs unsteady beneath him. The world had tilted on its axis in less than 24 hours. His home, his job, his grandmother's security, all being systematically stripped away. This isn't right, he said quietly. Peterson wouldn't meet his eyes. Life rarely is. Michael was waiting in the parking lot when Jamal emerged from the garage, cardboard box of personal items in his arms. That bastard got you fired too? Michael's face darkened with anger. Man, this is beyond messed up. How did you know? Rebecca's nurse called me. Thomas showed up at the hospital this morning with some specialist who administered routine medication before the regular doctor could arrive. Michael's voice dropped. The nurse said Rebecca was agitated afterward, kept saying they were trying to induce early labor. Jamal's grip tightened on the box. We need to see your professor friend, now. Professor William Harrison's office was tucked away in a converted Victorian house near the community college campus. Books lined every available surface, legal tomes stacked in precarious towers that seemed to defy gravity. The professor himself, a wiry man in his 60s with a shock of white hair and the promised ugly sweater, listened intently as Jamal recounted everything that had happened. "Fascinating," Harrison said when Jamal finished, removing his glasses to polish them thoughtfully. "Despicable, but fascinating from a legal standpoint." "Can they really evict us with just 2 days' notice?" Jamal asked. Harrison shook his head. "Not legally, no. Even with a change in ownership. Proper procedure requires at least 30 days' notice in this state. But Thomas Blackwood has a rather notorious reputation for manipulating legal gray areas to his advantage." "You know him?" Michael asked. "I know of him." Harrison replaced his glasses. "I've crossed paths with his legal team several times over the years. They represent the worst kind of corporate interests, the kind that see laws as inconveniences to be worked around rather than rules to be followed." The professor pulled a legal pad toward him, making rapid notes. "The eviction is contestable, but that takes time you may not have. The job termination is unfortunately murkier. Nevada is an at-will employment state." "What about Rebecca?" Jamal pressed. "She says Thomas is trying to kill her for the inheritance." Harrison stopped writing. "That's a serious allegation. Do you have any evidence?" "Just what she told me, and the car accident that nearly killed her." Jamal leaned forward. "She said if she dies before giving birth, or if both she and the baby die, Thomas inherits everything." "Not quite," Harrison corrected. "If Rebecca dies before giving birth, the inheritance would pass to the child. Thomas would likely petition to become the child's guardian, giving him control of the assets until the child reaches maturity." He tapped his pen against the pad. "If both die, then yes, as David Thompson's only living brother, Thomas would inherit the bulk of the estate." "We're talking billions," Michael added. "Indeed, the Thompson shipping empire is extensive." Harrison's expression grew somber. "Rebecca's suspicions may have merit. 2 years ago, I worked on a case involving a Thompson Group subsidiary. During discovery, I came across some troubling financial irregularities that suggested Thomas was siphoning corporate funds for personal use. The case settled before we could pursue those threads." "So what do we do?" Jamal asked. "First, document everything. The eviction notice, the termination, any communication from Thomas or his representatives." Harrison scribbled an address on a notepad. "This is a women's shelter that doesn't appear in any public records. They have medical staff and security. If we can get Rebecca there—" "She's under guard at the hospital," Michael interrupted. "And my grandmother needs specialized care," Jamal added. "We can't just disappear." Harrison sighed. "Then we need leverage, something concrete that would force Thomas to back off while we build a legal case." He studied Jamal intently. "You mentioned Rebecca believes her husband's death wasn't accidental either?" "She suggested it, yeah." "Start there. If Thomas is killed before, there might be evidence. Hospital records, autopsy reports, witness statements that don't align with the official story." Harrison stood up, indicating the meeting was concluding. "I'll file emergency motions to block the eviction and look into temporary restraining orders against Thomas. But without substantial evidence, judges tend to side with billionaires over mechanics. It's an unfortunate reality of our justice system." Jamal and Michael thanked the professor and headed toward the parking lot, the weight of their situation pressing down harder with each step. As they approached Michael's car, 2 men detached themselves from the shadows of a nearby van. Jamal recognized them immediately as Blackwood's silent escorts from the night he'd visited the apartment. One of them smiled coldly. "Mr. Blackwood suggests that you stop asking questions about family matters." He slapped a metal baton against his palm rhythmically. "It's healthier that way." Michael stepped forward. "Back off. We're not looking for trouble. The second man shoved Michael hard against the car, but trouble found you anyway. Leaving the parking lot, the two men who had threatened Jamal exchanged worried glances as Professor Harrison emerged from behind a parked car, wielding a baseball bat with surprising confidence for a man his age. "Gentlemen," Harrison called out, tapping the bat against the ground, "I believe you're trespassing on private property." The larger of the two men stepped toward Professor Harrison, eyes narrowing at the baseball bat. "Old man, you really don't want to get involved in this." "Fascinating assumption," Harrison replied, his academic tone completely at odds with the tension of the moment. "I'm already involved." He tapped the bat against the ground again, his grip suggesting he knew how to use it. "And I'm particularly skilled at documenting assault cases. The security cameras in this parking lot upload directly to my cloud storage." The man hesitated, glancing up at the cameras mounted on the light poles. His companion grabbed his arm. "Not worth it. Not here." For a moment, the standoff continued in tense silence. Then the first man spat on the ground near Jamal's feet. "This isn't the only place we can find you, or your grandmother." "You're only making it worse for yourselves," Harrison called, as the men retreated toward their van. "Threatening witnesses is a separate felony charge in this state." When the van finally pulled away, Jamal released the breath he'd been holding. "Professor, where did you get a baseball bat?" Harrison twirled the bat with surprising dexterity. "College championship 1982. Humanities versus Sciences. We destroyed the physics department." He smiled at their shocked expressions. "What? Professors have lives too." "Did you really have security cameras uploading to the cloud?" Michael asked, looking around the parking lot. "Goodness, no. The cameras are decorative, budget cuts." Harrison tucked the bat under his arm like an academic accessory. But they didn't know that. Despite the situation, Jamal couldn't help but laugh, a short, tension-releasing sound that died quickly. "They know where I live, where my grandmother is." Harrison's expression turned serious. "We need to move her immediately. I have a colleague who maintains a safe house for witnesses in sensitive cases. It's not ideal for someone with medical needs, but it's secure." "I can bring portable oxygen and basic monitoring equipment," Michael offered, "and I know a nurse who owes me a favor." 20 minutes later, they were back at Jamal's apartment, hurriedly packing essentials. His grandmother sat on the edge of her bed, confusion and fear etched on her face as Michael disconnected her oxygen concentrator. "Child, where are we going? Why must we leave in such a rush?" Her voice was stronger today, the new medication finally taking effect, but anxiety made her breathing labored. Jamal knelt before her, taking her weathered hands in his. "Someone dangerous is upset with me, Grandma. We need to stay somewhere else for a little while." She studied his face with eyes that had never failed to see through his childhood lies. "This is about that man who came here, isn't it? The one with the cold eyes." "Yes," Jamal admitted. "He wants to hurt someone I'm trying to help." Her expression hardened. "Then you're doing the right thing. Your grandfather didn't raise a man who turns away when others need help." She squeezed his hands. "I'll be fine wherever we go." An hour later, they had checked into the Pinewood Motel, a shabby establishment on the outskirts of town where the desk clerk accepted cash without questions and didn't look too closely at IDs. The room was small and smelled of ancient cigarette smoke, poorly masked by chemical air freshener, but it had 2 beds and a working bathroom. Michael had brought a portable oxygen concentrator borrowed from the hospital's home care division, promising to return it before anyone noticed it missing. The nurse he'd mentioned, a former girlfriend named Sophia, had agreed to stop by after her shift to check on Jamal's grandmother. "It's just temporary," Jamal assured his grandmother as he helped her settle onto the bed farthest from the door. "Professor Harrison is working on legal options." She nodded, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion from the move. "God sees what you're doing, child. He won't abandon you." Michael left reluctantly around 7, needed for his night shift at the hospital. "I'll see what else I can find out about David Thompson's death," he promised. "Call me if anything happens." Professor Harrison had also returned to his office to begin filing emergency motions, leaving Jamal alone with his sleeping grandmother and too many unanswered questions. He paced the small room, occasionally peering through the dusty curtains at the nearly empty parking lot. The motel was the kind of place where people minded their own business, exactly what they needed, but also the kind of place where two men with batons could show up without raising alarms. Around 9, Sophia arrived, a petite woman with tired eyes and gentle hands. She checked his grandmother's vitals efficiently, adjusted her oxygen, and provided several days' worth of medical supplies. "Michael says you're in some kind of trouble," she said quietly as she packed up her kit. He didn't give details, but he was worried, really worried. "It's complicated," Jamal replied, "but thank you for helping us." She handed him a prepaid cell phone. "Michael asked me to give you this, said you might need a number that can't be traced." After Sophia left, Jamal sat in the stiff chair by the window, alternating between watching his grandmother sleep and scanning the parking lot for suspicious vehicles. The envelope of cash from Blackwood sat on the dresser. Blood money, he now realized, but still their only financial resource with his job gone. His regular phone remained silent. No further threats, no updates from Michael or Harrison. The quiet felt oppressive, loaded with anticipation. Just before midnight, as Jamal's eyes grew heavy with exhaustion, the prepaid phone rang, startling him fully awake. The number was blocked. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Is this Jamal Williams?" A woman's voice, hushed and nervous. "Who's asking?" "My name is Andrea Feldman. I was Thomas Blackwood's executive assistant." She spoke rapidly, as if afraid of being interrupted. "I don't have much time. He fired me this afternoon when he discovered I'd been accessing files related to David Thompson's death." Jamal sat up straighter. "Why are you calling me?" "Because you're trying to help Rebecca, and no one else is." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've worked for the Thompson Group for 8 years. I was there when David died. It wasn't an accident. That's what Rebecca believes." "She's right." Andrea lowered her voice further. "David had a severe peanut allergy. It was documented everywhere, in his medical records, our company insurance, even our catering instructions. Everyone knew. But somehow, the night he died, he was served a sauce containing peanut oil at a business dinner. Couldn't that be a mistake? A new chef, maybe?" The chef was questioned. He insists the dish never contained peanuts and that someone must have added the oil afterward. The police dismissed it as a tragic accident, but... She hesitated. Thomas was the only other person at that dinner. He was also the only person who stood to gain if David died without children. But Rebecca was already pregnant, wasn't she? Not then. She conceived about a month after David's death. It was their last round of IVF. They'd been trying for years. Andrea's voice dropped to a whisper. When Thomas found out she was pregnant, something changed. He became obsessed with her care, insisting on specific doctors, monitoring her medications. I thought he was just being protective of his brother's child, but now you think he's trying to eliminate her too. I know he is. I overheard him on the phone with someone, discussing how the car problem had failed, and they needed a more medical solution that would look natural. The fear in her voice was palpable. I accessed his private files after that. There's a life insurance policy on Rebecca that he took out as her financial advisor after David died. $20 million. Jamal's mind raced. "We need to go to the police with this." Andrea laughed bitterly. "With what proof? My word against his? I'd be arrested for corporate espionage before I finished giving my statement." She paused, the sound of papers rustling in the background. Look into David's death. The medical examiner was Dr. James Harrington. He had questions that never made it into the final report. How do you know that? Because Thomas paid him $200,000 as a consulting fee the week after the report was filed. Andrea's voice suddenly became urgent. Someone's coming. I have to go. Be careful, Thomas has people everywhere. The line went dead, leaving Jamal staring at the phone in stunned silence. After a moment, he began typing the information into his regular phone's notes app. Dr. James Harrington, the peanut oil allegation, the mysterious payment. His grandmother stirred, her breathing changing pattern slightly. Jamal went to check her oxygen levels, adjusting the cannula that had slipped from her nose. As he did, headlights swept across the motel room window, illuminating the shabby interior for a moment before passing by. A car door slammed somewhere nearby, then another. Jamal moved silently to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. A black sedan had parked at the far end of the lot, its lights now off. In the dim glow of the motel's neon sign, he could make out two figures sitting inside, not moving, just watching. His heart rate accelerated. They couldn't have traced him here. He'd paid cash, used no ID. Unless they'd followed Michael or Sophia, or unless Thomas Blackwood's reach extended even further than they'd imagined. The prepaid phone buzzed with a text message. Stay inside. Don't turn on lights. Help coming. It was from a different blocked number than Andrea's call. Jamal moved his grandmother's bed further from the window, positioning himself between her and the door. He grabbed the only potential weapon in the room, a metal curtain rod that had been partially detached from the wall. Minutes stretched like hours as he watched the black sedan through the curtain's gap. Finally, a second vehicle pulled into the lot, Professor Harrison's ancient Volvo. The professor parked directly in front of Jamal's room and got out, carrying what appeared to be a bag of takeout food, a perfectly normal visitor to a motel. As Harrison approached the room, the black sedan's engine started. Headlights flashed on, and the car slowly pulled away, circling the lot once before exiting onto the main road. Jamal opened the door at Harrison's gentle knock. The professor's face was grim. They found you faster than I anticipated, Harrison said, setting down the bag that actually did contain food. We need to move your grandmother again at first light. How did they track us? I'm not certain, but I have a theory. Harrison pulled a small electronic device from his pocket and began scanning the room methodically. Near the dresser, the device emitted a high-pitched tone. The professor reached down and retrieved Jamal's jacket, turning one of the pockets inside out to reveal a tiny black disc, no larger than a button. Tracking device, Harrison explained. Quite sophisticated. They must have planted it during their visit to your apartment. Jamal's blood ran cold. If they're tracking me, nowhere is safe. Which is precisely why you'll stay here, visible and trackable, Harrison replied, while we move your grandmother to a truly secure location before dawn. And Rebecca, we can't just leave her at the hospital with Thomas controlling her care. One problem at a time, my boy. Harrison's expression was determined. First, we protect those we can. Then we gather evidence. Michael is looking into David Thompson's medical records as we speak. Someone else is helping, too, Jamal explained about Andrea's call. Thomas's former assistant. She says the medical examiner had questions about David's death. Harrison's eyebrows rose. Excellent. A potential witness with insider knowledge, though I fear for her safety if Thomas suspects her betrayal. As they talked, Jamal continued to check the window periodically, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. While his grandmother slept peacefully, oblivious to the danger, he observed the car park across the street, engine running but headlights off. Dawn broke reluctantly over the motel parking lot, pale light seeping through the threadbare curtains. Jamal hadn't slept, his eyes burning with exhaustion as he watched his grandmother's chest rise and fall, in the rhythmic pattern of deep sleep. Harrison had left hours ago, taking the tracking device with him to plant on a city bus heading across town, a temporary diversion at best. The professor's words echoed in his mind. Document everything. Find concrete evidence. Easier said than done when facing an opponent with virtually unlimited resources and seemingly no moral boundaries. Jamal's phone vibrated. Michael had sent a text. Meet me at hospital cafeteria. 7 a.m. Found something. After ensuring the nurse Sophia would stay with his grandmother, Jamal drove cautiously to Memorial Hospital, constantly checking his rearview mirror for signs of surveillance. The hospital cafeteria was just beginning its morning rush. Doctors grabbing coffee before rounds, night shift workers having a final meal before heading home. Michael sat in the farthest corner, dark circles under his eyes betraying his overnight shift. He pushed a coffee toward Jamal as he sat down. You look worse than my patients, Michael said. Didn't sleep. Jamal took a grateful sip of the bitter hospital coffee. What did you find? Michael glanced around before sliding his tablet across the table. On screen was a medical record with the Thompson Group logo at the top. It wasn't easy. These records are restricted, but I called in a favor from a friend in records management. Jamal studied the document, David Thompson's admission record from 6 months earlier. Anaphylactic shock, he read. Severe allergic reaction to peanut exposure. Keep reading, Michael urged. Jamal scrolled down to the physician's notes section. Patient presented with classic symptoms of severe anaphylaxis approximately 20 minutes after meal consumption. Despite immediate epinephrine administration by dining companion, brother, response was minimal. Patient was in full cardiac arrest upon arrival at emergency department. Resuscitation attempts unsuccessful. Note: patient history indicates extensive awareness of peanut allergy since childhood. Family confirms patient was vigilant about dietary restrictions. Request toxicology screen to confirm exposure source. Dr. E. Chen. A handwritten note was scrawled in the margin. Toxicology request denied by family representative T. Blackwood. Standard autopsy waived. Cause of death recorded as accidental food allergy exposure. He denied the toxicology screen, Jamal said, looking up. Why would he do that if it was just an accident? Exactly. Michael took the tablet back. And there's more. I found the original emergency room report. The paramedics noted that David's EpiPen appeared to have been used, but when they tested his blood after arrival, the epinephrine levels were lower than expected for a recent injection. So Thomas claimed he gave him the EpiPen, but maybe he didn't. Or it was empty. Or tampered with, Michael said grimly. Hard to prove now, but there's something else. He pulled up another document. This is the catering order for the business dinner where David died. Look at the special instructions. In bold red text, severe peanut allergy. No peanut products or oils of any kind. The chef insisted his food didn't contain peanuts. Jamal remembered Andrea's words. So how did David get exposed? That's what Dr. Chen wanted to know. But she was removed from the case before the death certificate was finalized. The attending physician who signed off was Dr. James Harrington. The same doctor Andrea mentioned, the one who got the mysterious payment. Michael nodded. I can't access financial records, but if what she said is true... Thomas killed his brother, Jamal finished, and now he's trying to kill Rebecca. Their conversation was interrupted by the overhead hospital intercom. Code Blue, maternity, room 307. Code Blue maternity, room 307. Both men froze, then locked eyes in horror. That's Rebecca's room, Michael whispered. They abandoned their coffee and ran toward the elevators, Jamal's heart pounding. When the elevator proved too slow to arrive, they took the stairs, racing up 3 flights. The maternity ward was in controlled chaos, nurses running with equipment, a crash cart being wheeled rapidly down the hallway. Through the crowd, Jamal caught a glimpse of Rebecca's room, the door thrown open, medical staff surrounding her bed. What happened? Michael grabbed a passing nurse he knew. Pregnant patient went into distress after morning medication, premature labor and dropping vitals. The nurse glanced at Jamal. You shouldn't be here. What medication? Michael pressed. Who authorized it? Her brother-in-law brought a specialist. Dr. Mercer administered something for fetal monitoring. I don't know the details. The nurse pulled away. I have to get more supplies. Jamal tried to approach Rebecca's room but was blocked by hospital security. Through the doorway, he could see her on the bed, oxygen mask over her face, monitors beeping erratically. A doctor was shouting orders as a nurse prepared an injection. We need to get in there, Jamal said desperately. Impossible, Michael replied. But I know what we can do. He pulled Jamal toward a different corridor. Rebecca's regular doctor, Dr. Chen, the same one who treated David. She's doing rounds on the second floor. She should be aware of what's happening. They found Dr. Chen reviewing charts at the nursing station. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, her white coat immaculately pressed despite the early hour. Dr. Chen, Michael began urgently, there's an emergency with Rebecca Thompson. A specialist brought in by Thomas Blackwood administered medication that's caused complications. Dr. Chen's expression darkened. I was removed from Mrs. Thompson's case yesterday. Mr. Blackwood filed a complaint claiming I was ignoring his input as her medical proxy. He's not her medical proxy, Jamal interjected. He's fabricated those documents. We believe he's trying to harm her, just like he harmed his brother. Dr. Chen's eyes widened. David's case. I had concerns about the circumstances, but the family, meaning Thomas, insisted on minimal investigation. The hospital administration pressured me to sign off on the death certificate without the toxicology report I'd requested. We have reason to believe Thomas tampered with David's food and possibly his EpiPen, Michael explained rapidly. Now Rebecca and her baby are in distress after medication authorized by Thomas. Please, you have to intervene. The doctor hesitated only briefly before grabbing her phone. I'm still on staff. I have the right to consult on any emergency case. She dialed quickly. This is Dr. Chen. I'm coming to assess the code blue in maternity 307. Have the medication that was administered set aside for analysis. She hung up and gestured for them to follow. Quickly. They rushed back toward the elevators, but as they rounded the corner, Jamal froze. Thomas Blackwood was standing by the nurse's station in the maternity ward, engaged in intense conversation with a distinguished-looking man in a white coat, presumably the specialist, Dr. Mercer. That's him, Jamal whispered, pulling Dr. Chen back. Thomas Blackwood. They watched as Thomas checked his watch impatiently. The specialist was gesturing toward Rebecca's room, where the commotion continued. We need a distraction, Dr. Chen said. I can't examine her with them hovering. Jamal made a split-second decision. He strode toward the nearest fire alarm and pulled it without hesitation. The effect was immediate. Alarms blared throughout the floor, lights flashed, and the hospital emergency protocol kicked in. Staff began directing visitors toward exits, checking rooms for patients who needed assistance evacuating. In the confusion, Thomas and Dr. Mercer moved away from the nurse's station, momentarily distracted. Jamal seized the opportunity, slipping past them toward Rebecca's room while Dr. Chen followed close behind. Inside, a nurse was preparing to administer an injection while monitoring Rebecca's vitals. Her face was pale, her body trembling as contractions racked her frame far too early in her pregnancy. Stop! Jamal shouted, lunging forward to knock the syringe from the nurse's hand. Don't give her that! The nurse looked stunned. Sir, you can't be in here. We're trying to stabilize her. Dr. Chen stepped forward, authority in her stance. I'm Dr. Chen, attending physician. What medication is that? Dr. Mercer prescribed it to stop the premature contractions, the nurse explained, confusion evident. Mr. Blackwood said it was approved protocol. "Let me see it," Dr. Chen demanded, picking up the fallen syringe. Before she could examine it, Thomas burst into the room, his face contorted with rage. "What is the meaning of this? Get him out of here!" He pointed at Jamal. "This man is stalking my sister-in-law." "Mr. Blackwood," Dr. Chen began, "as Mrs. Thompson's former physician, I have concerns about this medication." "You were removed from this case," Thomas snapped. "Security, remove these people immediately." The fire alarm still blared as security guards appeared at the door. In the chaos, Jamal locked eyes with Rebecca, who was now conscious, her terrified gaze darting between him and Thomas. "The medication?" she gasped through her oxygen mask. "Don't let them—" Thomas moved swiftly, grabbing the syringe from Dr. Chen. "This is a standard tocolytic to stop premature labor. Dr. Mercer prescribed it specifically for this situation." "Then you won't mind if we verify that," Dr. Chen replied evenly, reaching for the syringe. Thomas's professional veneer slipped for just a moment, a flash of something cold and calculating in his eyes. Then he lunged at Jamal, tackling him against the medical equipment. "This man is trying to harm my family," Thomas shouted, his fist connecting with Jamal's jaw. Jamal fought back instinctively, the two men grappling as monitors crashed to the floor. Rebecca's panicked cries added to the cacophony of alarms and shouting. The security guards rushed forward, pulling both men apart. In the struggle, the syringe had fallen again, rolling under the bed. Dr. Chen quickly retrieved it, slipping it into her coat pocket while attention was focused on the fight. Hospital security held Jamal firmly as Thomas straightened his expensive suit, composure restored, but hatred burning in his eyes. "This man has been harassing my family for days," Thomas declared smoothly. "He's mentally unstable, fixated on my sister-in-law after pulling her from a car accident. I want him arrested immediately." As if on cue, police officers appeared in the doorway, responding to the hospital's emergency call. Thomas smiled victoriously as he saw them, nodding in recognition to the lead officer. "Detective Ross, thank God you're here. This man assaulted me and endangered my sister-in-law's life. He needs to be taken into custody." The detective glanced between Thomas and Jamal, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Blackwood, what seems to be the problem?" "This intruder," Thomas pointed at Jamal, "disrupted emergency medical treatment and physically attacked me. I want him charged with assault and trespassing." Detective Ross nodded to his officers, who took over from hospital security, handcuffing Jamal despite his protests. "Wait," Dr. Chen attempted to intervene. "There are serious questions about the medication that was—" "Dr. Chen," Thomas interrupted smoothly, "you were removed from this case for inappropriate conduct. Your opinion is neither requested nor relevant." As the officers began leading Jamal away, he caught one last glimpse of Rebecca on the bed, her eyes wide with fear, one hand protectively covering her swollen belly. Thomas stood over her, his back to Jamal, already speaking into his phone. Through the window, Jamal saw Thomas look back at him being led away, a victorious smile spreading across his face as the police escorted their prisoner toward the elevator. The fluorescent lights of the precinct interrogation room buzzed incessantly, casting harsh shadows across Jamal's face. His jaw ached where Thomas had struck him, and the metal handcuffs bit into his wrists as he sat across from Detective Ross, who regarded him with practiced indifference. "Let's go through this again," Ross said, flipping through a notepad. "You admit to pulling the fire alarm, entering a patient's room without authorization, and engaging in a physical altercation with Thomas Blackwood." "I was trying to prevent him from harming Rebecca," Jamal insisted, leaning forward. "The medication they were giving her wasn't what they claimed. Dr. Chen was concerned." "Dr. Chen," Ross interrupted, "has provided a statement saying she intervened due to professional curiosity. She doesn't support your allegations against Mr. Blackwood. Jamal's heart sank. She's lying. She was just as concerned as I was. She took the syringe to test it. The hospital has no record of any syringe being collected for testing, Ross replied flatly. And Mrs. Thompson's condition has stabilized under Dr. Mercer's care, according to the latest update. Through the two-way mirror, Jamal could see shadows moving in the observation room. He caught a glimpse of Thomas Blackwood's profile as the door opened briefly, the businessman chatting amicably with someone who appeared to be the precinct captain. "You don't understand," Jamal said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Thomas killed his brother for the inheritance. He's trying to kill Rebecca to get control of the baby and the Thompson fortune. I have evidence." "What evidence exactly?" Ross asked, skepticism evident. "Hearsay from a fired employee? Hospital records you shouldn't have access to? None of this would stand up in court. Just check the payment to Dr. Harrington after David Thompson's death. $200,000 to sign off on a death without proper investigation." Ross sighed, closing his notepad. "Mr. Williams, you're facing serious charges: breaking and entering, assault, interfering with medical personnel, harassment. With your background—" "What background? I have no criminal record. A history of financial instability. A dying relative dependent on expensive medications. Suddenly inserted yourself into the lives of one of the wealthiest families in the state." Ross's implication was clear. "Looks like opportunism from where I sit." "That's not. Where's your grandmother now, Mr. Williams?" The question sent ice through Jamal's veins. "Why?" "Because she's not at your apartment. The eviction notice is valid, by the way. Blackwood Holdings acquired your building legally last month. The previous owner just failed to notify tenants until the transfer completed." Jamal fell silent, unwilling to reveal his grandmother's location. The detective took his silence as admission. "You're in serious trouble, son. I suggest you start thinking about a plea deal, cooperate, sign a statement admitting harassment, agree to stay away from the Thompson family, and maybe we can get this down to misdemeanor trespassing." "I'm not signing anything," Jamal stated firmly. "Call Professor William Harrison. He's my legal representative," Ross snorted. "The community college professor who thinks he's a lawyer? Good luck with that." Before Jamal could respond, the door to the interrogation room swung open. A woman Jamal had never seen before entered, mid-40s, sharp suit, badge clipped to her belt, and an air of authority that made Detective Ross straighten in his chair. "That will be all, Detective," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ross frowned. "Detective Alvarez, this is my case." "Not anymore." She placed a document on the table. "This case has been flagged by the state attorney's office. I'm taking over." "On whose authority?" Ross demanded. "Mine." Another figure appeared in the doorway, Professor Harrison, holding a leather portfolio. "I've filed an emergency petition with Judge Watkins citing evidence of corruption and conflict of interest in this investigation." Ross's face reddened. "You can't just waltz in here and—" "Actually, he can," Detective Alvarez interrupted. "Judge Watkins signed the order an hour ago. I'm with the State Police Special Investigations Unit. We're looking into several cases involving the Thompson Group and potential criminal misconduct by local officials." She turned to the officer standing by the door. "Remove Mr. Williams's handcuffs and give us the room." Jamal rubbed his wrists as the cuffs came off, watching Ross storm out of the room, nearly colliding with Thomas Blackwood in the hallway. Through the open door, Jamal saw Blackwood's face transform from confident smugness to barely controlled rage as Harrison gave him a small, mocking wave. When the door closed, Detective Alvarez sat across from Jamal. "Rebecca Thompson regained consciousness 30 minutes ago. She's made a partial statement implicating Thomas Blackwood in a scheme to endanger her pregnancy." Relief flooded through Jamal. "She's okay? The baby?" "Both stable for now," Harrison confirmed, taking the seat beside Jamal. Dr. Chen found her conscious. The medication in that syringe wasn't a tocolytic to stop contractions. It was Pitocin, which induces labor. At Rebecca's stage of pregnancy, that could have been catastrophic. "There's more," Alvarez added. Rebecca's regular nurse noticed puncture marks on her IV line that couldn't be accounted for in her medical chart. Someone was adding unauthorized substances to her drip. Harrison placed a reassuring hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You were right to be suspicious. You may have saved her life." Again. "What about my grandmother?" Jamal asked urgently. "Ross knew she wasn't at our apartment." "She's safe," Harrison assured him. "My colleague moved her to a secure location before dawn, as planned. Thomas's men have been watching an empty motel room all day." Alvarez opened a file folder. "Mr. Williams, we need your complete statement. Everything from the beginning. The car accident, Thomas Blackwood's visit, the confidentiality agreement. Everything you've learned about David Thompson's death. We're building a case, but we need it done properly." For the next hour, Jamal recounted every detail, from pulling Rebecca from the burning car to the confrontation at the hospital. Harrison occasionally interjected with clarifying legal points, while Alvarez took meticulous notes. "One more thing," Jamal added as he finished. "Andrea Feldman, Thomas's former assistant. She called me with information about David's death. She might be in danger." Alvarez's expression tightened. "We've been trying to locate Ms. Feldman since yesterday. Her apartment is empty, and she hasn't used her credit cards or phone since her call to you." The implication hung heavy in the air. Jamal hoped Andrea had simply gone into hiding, but feared a darker alternative. "Am I free to go?" he asked finally. "Yes," Alvarez confirmed. "But we need you to remain available. And I strongly suggest you stay away from Thomas Blackwood. He's dangerous, and now he's desperate." Harrison gathered his papers. "I've filed for an emergency restraining order against Thomas on behalf of Rebecca. She's being moved to a different hospital, under state police protection." As they prepared to leave, the door burst open again. This time, a harried-looking officer stood there, his expression urgent. "Detective Alvarez, there's been a development. Rebecca Thompson has gone into active labor. The baby's coming, weeks premature." "I need to be there," Jamal said immediately. "That's not advisable," Alvarez began, but Harrison interrupted. "Actually, Rebecca specifically requested his presence when she gave her statement. Said he was the only person she trusted completely." Alvarez hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But we go together, and you stay with me at all times." The drive to the hospital was tense, Jamal's mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Had Thomas managed one final attempt at harming Rebecca before being removed? Was the premature labor a result of the medications already administered? Would the baby survive? When they arrived at the hospital, a different facility from Memorial, Jamal noted, security was heavy. State police officers stood at entrances and elevators, checking IDs against an approved list. Rebecca had been moved to a specialized birthing suite in the high-risk obstetrics unit. As they approached, Jamal could hear the medical team's controlled urgency behind the closed door. "Wait here," Alvarez instructed, positioning Jamal in a chair across from the security detail. "I'll check on her status." The minutes crawled by as Jamal sat, anxiety building with each passing moment. Harrison had stayed behind at the precinct to finalize paperwork for the restraining order, leaving Jamal alone with his thoughts and the stoic state trooper standing guard. A commotion at the end of the corridor snapped him to attention. Thomas Blackwood was arguing with hospital security, his voice carrying clearly. "This is absurd. I'm her only family. I demand to see her immediately." When the security officer refused to allow him entry, Thomas pulled out his phone. Do you know who I am? I'll have your job by morning. Get me the hospital administrator. Jamal shrank back in his chair, hoping Thomas wouldn't spot him. But luck wasn't on his side. As Thomas scanned the hallway, his gaze locked with Jamal's, and his expression transformed into pure hatred. Before security could stop him, Thomas was striding toward Jamal, his voice lowered to a menacing hiss. You think you've won? This isn't over, not by a long shot. The state trooper stepped between them. Sir, you need to leave, now. Thomas straightened his tie, his professional mask slipping back into place. Just delivering a message. He leaned around the trooper, eyes boring into Jamal's. People who cross me don't tend to live happy lives, or long ones. As security escorted Thomas toward the elevator, Alvarez emerged from Rebecca's room, her expression grim. The baby's in distress. They're preparing for an emergency C-section. Will they be okay? Jamal asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctors are doing everything possible, Alvarez replied, which wasn't an answer at all. At that moment, the door to Rebecca's room opened again. A nurse in surgical scrubs emerged, carrying something in her hand, a syringe. Detective, she called, urgency in her voice. We found this in the medication cart. It's not hospital issued, and it's not on any of our records. Alvarez took the syringe, examining it carefully. When was the last time that cart was checked? An hour ago, during shift change, the nurse replied. It wasn't there then. Jamal and Alvarez exchanged alarmed looks. Thomas was just here, Jamal said. Could he have... The cameras, Alvarez interrupted, already moving toward the nurse's station. We need to check the security footage now. As they reviewed the footage, the truth became clear. The recording showed Thomas slipping into a supply room during his argument with security, emerging moments later with something concealed in his palm. He was planning to use hospital security's distraction with him as cover, Alvarez realized. Create a scene at one entrance while slipping the syringe into Rebecca's medication cart. Jamal stared at the monitor, watching Thomas's calculated movements. What was in it? We'll have to test it, but given his previous attempts... Alvarez didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. A doctor in surgical scrubs rushed out of Rebecca's room, calling for additional assistance. Monitors beeped urgently within, the sound of medical equipment being moved creating a backdrop of controlled chaos. I need to be with her, Jamal insisted. Alvarez hesitated, then nodded. Stay out of the medical team's way. Inside the room, Rebecca lay pale and trembling on the bed, oxygen mask over her face, monitors displaying alarming patterns. Her eyes found Jamal's as he entered, relief momentarily displacing the pain and fear. Jamal, she gasped through the mask. Don't let them take my baby. I'm here, he promised, moving to her side as the medical team prepared for the emergency procedure. They won't hurt either of you, not anymore. As the doctors worked to save Rebecca and her child, Jamal watched from the corner of the room, silent witness to both the clinical efficiency of modern medicine and the human desperation to cling to life. Through the viewing window, he could see Thomas being placed in handcuffs by state police officers, the syringe now secured as evidence. In the parking lot, Jamal saw through the window that Thomas was speaking on the phone with a smile of victory, while a doctor picked up the fallen syringe and examined it with a worried expression. The precinct buzzed with a distinct energy that Jamal had never experienced, not as a citizen seeking help, certainly not as a suspect. Officers moved with purpose, phones rang incessantly, and beneath it all ran an undercurrent of tension. He sat, alone in the interrogation room, no longer handcuffed, but still very much trapped. The harsh overhead lighting made his eyes ache after hours of questioning. Detective Ross had returned with reinforcements, a humorless officer who hadn't introduced himself, but whose expensive watch and immaculate suit screamed, Department Brass. Let's try this one more time, Ross said, his voice dripping with forced patience. You broke into a secured hospital floor, interfered with medical treatment ordered by licensed physicians, and physically assaulted Thomas Blackwood. I've already explained. Your explanations keep changing, the brass cut in, his voice cultured and cold. First it was concern for Mrs. Thompson. Then it became wild accusations of attempted murder. Now you're implicating one of this city's most respected businessmen in his own brother's death. Jamal straightened in his uncomfortable chair. I'm telling the truth. The same truth I've been telling from the beginning. Ross snorted. With what evidence? The word of a fired mechanic living on the edge of eviction? He leaned forward, dropping his voice to a confidential tone that somehow felt more threatening than yelling. You know what I see. I see a young man who pulled someone from a car, got a taste of hero worship, and couldn't let go. Then you found out who she was, what she was worth, and saw an opportunity. That's not what happened. No. Ross opened a folder, extracting a photograph of the cash Blackwood had given Jamal. $50,000 in your apartment. Funny way to handle money from someone you claim is trying to kill people. He paid me to stay silent. So you admit taking his money. The brass made a note on his legal pad. Yet you violated the agreement. Some might call that extortion. Through the window of the interrogation room, Jamal caught glimpses of the precinct bullpen. Thomas Blackwood sat comfortably in the captain's office, gesturing animatedly as he spoke. The captain, nodding with inappropriate deference. Their laughter carried faintly through the glass. My grandmother, Jamal said suddenly. Where is she? Ross's expression shifted, a subtle tell that sent dread coursing through Jamal. Social services picked her up this afternoon, the detective said. Apparently, anonymous concerns were raised about elder neglect. Something about abandoning a medically fragile senior in an unlicensed care setting. Jamal surged to his feet. That's a lie. She was being protected from Blackwood's threats. The brass didn't even bother standing. Sit down, Mr. Williams. Outbursts only strengthen the case for the mental health evaluation we're considering. Mental health? Jamal sank back into his chair, the reality of his situation crashing down. Thomas Blackwood had systematically dismantled every aspect of his life. His job, his home, his reputation, and now his grandmother's safety, all while sitting comfortably in the captain's office beyond reach. Look, Ross said, his tone softening in a transparent attempt at good cop. You're facing serious charges here, but there are ways to minimize the damage. A signed statement admitting you've been experiencing delusions and paranoid thoughts would go a long way. We could recommend psychiatric treatment instead of jail time. I'm not delusional. Then you're looking at breaking and entering, assault, interfering with medical personnel, filing false reports, the brass listed dispassionately. 3 to 5 years minimum. Jamal stared at the scratched surface of the interrogation table, despair threatening to overwhelm him. He'd tried to do the right thing, save a woman and her unborn child from a predator. And yet here he sat, treated like a criminal, while the real criminal drank coffee with the police captain. The door opened without warning. Both Ross and the brass looked up, irritation quickly transforming to confusion as a woman stepped into the room, her badge held out before her like a shield. This interview is over, she announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ross stood. Who the hell are you? Detective Elena Rodriguez, State Police Special Crimes Unit. She surveyed the room with clinical detachment. Mr. Williams is being released into state custody as a material witness in an ongoing investigation. The brass recovered first. There must be some mistake. Mr. Williams is being held on multiple local charges. No mistake. Rodriguez placed a document on the table. Signed by Judge Camilla Watkins of the 8th Circuit. You can direct any questions to her office, though I doubt she'll take your calls at this hour. Through the open door, Jamal saw Professor Harrison in the bullpen, deep in conversation with a man in an expensive suit who was decidedly not affiliated with Thomas Blackwood. The captain had emerged from his office, his face flushed with anger as he spoke urgently to Blackwood. "Mr. Williams," Rodriguez addressed him directly, "you're free to go. Officer Martin will process your release." Ross wasn't ready to concede. "This is completely irregular. We haven't finished our investigation." "Your investigation was compromised from the start, Detective." Rodriguez cut in, her voice sharp. "The state has concerns about conflicts of interest within this department, specifically regarding cases involving the Thompson Group." The brass placed a restraining hand on Ross's arm. "We should discuss this with the captain." "Excellent idea," Rodriguez agreed, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "I have some questions for him as well, particularly about the 18 holes of golf he played with Mr. Blackwood at Pine Valley last month. The round that didn't appear on his public disclosure forms." The two men departed without another word to Jamal, their body language tense as they crossed to the captain's office. Thomas Blackwood was staring directly at Jamal now, his composed exterior finally showing cracks as the situation spiraled beyond his control. Rodriguez turned to Jamal. "You okay?" He nodded numbly. "My grandmother is fine." Professor Harrison anticipated Mr. Blackwood's move and had her transferred to a state-monitored medical facility before social services arrived at the motel. "She's receiving excellent care." Relief washed over Jamal, so intense it made him lightheaded. "Thank you, but how?" "Rebecca Thompson woke up," Rodriguez explained, guiding him toward the door. "She gave us a statement about Blackwood's actions and his threats against you. That was enough to get Judge Watkins involved, and she doesn't particularly care for wealthy men who try to manipulate her judicial district." In the bullpen, Harrison greeted Jamal with a reassuring nod as the officer processed his release paperwork. Through the captain's office window, the conversation inside appeared to be growing heated, Thomas Blackwood's carefully maintained facade crumbling as he gesticulated angrily. "What about Rebecca, the baby?" Jamal asked. "Both stable," Harrison said, joining them. "The emergency C-section was successful. She delivered a girl, small, but fighter's spirit, according to the nurses. They're both under protection at University Medical Center." Jamal's personal effects were returned: his wallet, keys, phone. As they prepared to leave, the well-dressed man Harrison had been speaking with approached. "Mr. Williams?" The man extended his hand. "Jason Chen, Assistant State Attorney. I'd like to thank you for your persistence in this matter. Without your intervention, we might never have connected several ongoing investigations involving the Thompson Group." Jamal shook his hand automatically, still processing the dramatic reversal of his situation. "Investigations? Financial irregularities, suspicious deaths, witness intimidation. The list keeps growing." Chen glanced toward the captain's office. "Thomas Blackwood has powerful friends, but he's made powerful enemies too. People who've been waiting for an opportunity like this." The precinct door burst open, and a woman rushed in, her designer clothes rumpled, her eyes wild with a combination of fear and determination. Jamal recognized her immediately from the photo on the employee badge he'd glimpsed in his brief conversation. Andrea Feldman, Thomas Blackwood's former assistant. "I need protection," she announced to the startled desk sergeant, "and I have evidence against Thomas Blackwood." Rodriguez moved quickly to intercept her before the local officers could respond. "Ms. Feldman, I'm Detective Rodriguez, State Police. We've been looking for you." Andrea clutched a small drive in her hand like a lifeline. "I have recordings, all of it, every meeting for the last 6 months, including when he planned the car accident." Her voice dropped. "And what he did to David." Chen was already on his phone, speaking rapidly to someone about witness protection and immediate deposition. Harrison guided both Jamal and Andrea toward the exit, while Rodriguez engaged the increasingly agitated desk sergeant. In the parking lot, Jamal glanced back at the precinct building. Through the window, he could see Thomas Blackwood standing, phone pressed to his ear, watching them leave. Even at a distance, the cold calculation in his eyes was unmistakable. "Is this really over?" Jamal asked Harrison as they reached the professor's ancient Volvo. "Hardly," Harrison replied, opening the door for Andrea. "This is just the beginning of a very complex legal battle. But the immediate danger to you, your grandmother, and Rebecca has been neutralized. Thomas won't risk more overt actions with state authorities involved." As they drove away from the precinct, Andrea explained her disappearance. "After I called you, I knew Thomas would discover I'd accessed the files. I took what evidence I could and went to my sister's cabin upstate. No phones, no internet." She held up the drive. "I recorded everything. Every meeting in his office for months. It was my insurance policy." "Will it be enough?" Jamal asked. "Combined with Rebecca's testimony, the tampered medication, and the financial trail we've uncovered?" Harrison nodded slowly. "Yes, Thomas Blackwood will face justice." The night sky had cleared, stars visible despite the city lights. For the first time in days, Jamal felt he could breathe freely. His grandmother was safe. Rebecca and her baby had survived. The truth was finally emerging. Yet as they turned onto the highway toward the hospital where Rebecca was recovering, Jamal spotted a sleek black car pulling out from a side street, maintaining a discreet distance behind them. Harrison noticed it too, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "Thomas has resources beyond the local police," the professor said quietly, "and he's not the type to accept defeat gracefully." Andrea clutched the drive tighter. "His legal team is already working on damage control. They'll try to discredit us all, claim the recordings were manipulated, that Rebecca is emotionally unstable from her pregnancy." Harrison's phone chimed with a message. He asked Jamal to read it, keeping his eyes on the road and the trailing vehicle. "It's from Rodriguez," Jamal reported. "Blackwood posted bail. Judge Campbell approved it despite our objections. He's being processed out now." The implications hung heavy in the car. Thomas Blackwood, wealthy, connected, and now cornered, was about to be a free man again. While everyone sang parabens, Jamal noticed an official envelope on top of Rebecca's table, the notification that Thomas had filed for another appeal, a reminder that vigilance and courage must remain constant, even in moments of joy. The University Medical Center's maternity wing gleamed with soft lighting and an air of hushed efficiency that contrasted sharply with the chaos Jamal had witnessed at Memorial Hospital. Two uniformed state troopers stood outside a private room at the end of the corridor, their presence a silent testament to the gravity of the situation. Jamal hesitated at the threshold, suddenly unsure of his place in this unfolding drama. Through the partially open door, he could see medical staff moving purposefully around a hospital bed where Rebecca lay, pale but alert, a tiny bundle cradled against her chest. "You should go in," Harrison encouraged, his hand firm on Jamal's shoulder. "She's been asking for you." Taking a deep breath, Jamal nodded to the officers who verified his identity before allowing him to pass. The room was softly lit, monitors beeping with reassuring regularity. A nurse adjusting an IV line smiled at him before discreetly stepping out. Rebecca looked up as he entered, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes bright. "Jamal," she whispered, her voice hoarse but warm. "Meet Emma." He approached cautiously, peering at the tiny face nestled against Rebecca's hospital gown. The baby was impossibly small, her skin still bearing the reddish hue of the newly born, a wisp of dark hair visible beneath a knitted cap. "She's beautiful," Jamal said, his voice catching. "Is she—" 4 pounds, 3 ounces, Rebecca answered the unasked question. "Small, but fighters run in the family, apparently." Her smile faltered. "The doctors say we're both lucky. If you hadn't stopped that medication—" The door opened, and Detective Rodriguez entered with the doctor in tow, interrupting the moment. "Mrs. Thompson, Dr. Winters needs to examine the baby, Rodriguez explained, and we should talk about what happens next. Rebecca reluctantly allowed the nurse to take Emma to a bassinet in the corner, her eyes never leaving her daughter. The lab results came back, Rodriguez continued once the doctor began the examination. The syringe contained potassium chloride, enough to cause cardiac arrest, in a high enough concentration to appear natural, especially in someone who'd just undergone a C-section. Jamal felt a chill run through him. Thomas was going to kill her? That appears to have been the plan. Rodriguez's expression was grim. We also found evidence that someone had tampered with the cardiac monitoring equipment in this room before you arrived. It was set to delay alarms by nearly 3 minutes, critical time in a cardiac emergency. Rebecca's hands clutched at the hospital blanket. He thought of everything. Not everything. Harrison interjected from the doorway. He didn't account for Jamal's persistence, or Andrea's conscience, or the fact that his manipulation of local authorities would attract state attention. Rodriguez nodded. We've been monitoring Thomas Blackwood for months as part of a larger investigation into corporate fraud. Your case connected several dots we hadn't been able to link previously. The doctor finished examining Emma and returned her to Rebecca's arms. She's doing remarkably well for her gestational age, he reported. Another day or two of observation and we might be able to discuss discharge planning. As the doctor left, Rodriguez leaned closer to Rebecca. I need to ask about your brother-in-law's access to your medical care. When did it begin? Rebecca stroked Emma's cheek with a gentle finger. After David died. Thomas was surprisingly supportive at first, helped with funeral arrangements, took over running the company temporarily, insisted I focus on the pregnancy. Her voice hardened. Then came the suggestions. A new doctor, a different medication regimen, moving into the family estate for better monitoring of my condition. Did he ever explicitly claim legal authority over your medical decisions? Harrison asked. Not to me directly, but about a month ago I overheard him telling my regular doctor that he had medical power of attorney. When I confronted him, he claimed it was a misunderstanding. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was being paranoid, hormonal. Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was to have such a devoted brother-in-law. Classic gaslighting, Rodriguez noted, combined with isolation tactics. The car accident, Jamal said suddenly. You mentioned the brakes failed? Rebecca nodded. The car had just been serviced at the Thompson Group's corporate garage. Thomas insisted on it. Said he wanted to make sure everything was perfect for the baby's arrival. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The mechanics who worked on it have mysteriously transferred to overseas positions. Harrison made notes in his ever-present leather portfolio. And your husband's death? You suspected it wasn't accidental? David was meticulous about his allergy. He carried 2 EpiPens at all times, wore a medical alert bracelet, questioned every server at every restaurant. Rebecca's voice strengthened with conviction. There's no way he would have eaten anything containing peanuts willingly, and Thomas was the only one with him that night. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Andrea Feldman entered, looking more composed than she had at the police station, but still visibly tense. I'm sorry to intrude, she said, but the state attorney's office just finished their preliminary review of the recordings. She handed her phone to Rodriguez. They want to speak with you. As Rodriguez stepped into the hallway to take the call, Andrea approached Rebecca's bed. Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry. I should have come forward sooner. Rebecca studied her face. You were Thomas's assistant? Andrea nodded. For 8 years. I saw things, heard things, but convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere. Until the car accident. She swallowed hard. I overheard him on the phone afterward, angry that you had survived. That's when I started recording everything. You're very brave, Rebecca said softly. Andrea shook her head. Not brave enough, Not soon enough. Rodriguez returned, her expression carefully neutral. The state attorney is moving forward with charges against Thomas Blackwood. Financial fraud, evidence, tampering, and attempted murder. They're executing search warrants at his home and offices right now. A ripple of relief passed through the room, but Harrison remained cautious. What about the local judge who granted his bail? Judge Campbell has recused himself from any further proceedings after questions arose about his financial connections to the Thompson Group. Rodriguez's smile was tightly controlled. The case has been reassigned to Judge Watkins. That's good news, Harrison noted. Camilla Watkins is famously incorruptible. There's more, Rodriguez continued. The syringe Thomas attempted to plant in Rebecca's medication contained the same compound found in David Thompson's toxicology report, the one that was supposedly never completed. Rebecca gasped. They did run the tests? Dr. Chen ordered them privately, against direct instructions. She kept the results sealed until she could determine who to trust. Rodriguez glanced at baby Emma. The pattern of attempted killings is now established. The state's case is solid. For the first time since Jamal had pulled her from the burning car, true hope bloomed in Rebecca's eyes. It's really over? The immediate danger is, Harrison confirmed, though the legal process will take time. Thomas will fight with every resource at his disposal. But he'll do it from a cell, Rodriguez added. Judge Watkins has revoked his bail based on the new evidence. State police are taking him into custody as we speak. Andrea's phone chimed with a news alert. She showed the screen to the others, Thomas Blackwood being escorted from his downtown office in handcuffs, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. I should feel sorry for him, Rebecca said, surprising them all. He's still David's brother, but all I feel is relief. The door opened again, and a nurse entered with Emma's medication. As she checked the baby's vital signs, she smiled at the group. She's a fighter, this little one. Some premature babies struggle, but she's maintaining her temperature beautifully and even gaining weight already. When the nurse left, Jamal finally asked the question that had been nagging at him. What happens now? With the company, the inheritance? Rebecca shifted Emma to her other arm. David left controlling interest in the Thompson Group to me, with provisions for our child. Thomas received shares, but not control. That's what drove him to this. She looked down at her daughter. I'll have to take a more active role now, ensure the company operates ethically, for Emma's future. You won't be alone, Harrison assured her. The state attorney's office will appoint financial conservators during the investigation to ensure the Thompson assets remain protected. As the conversation continued, Jamal found himself drifting toward the window, suddenly aware of his outsider status in this world of corporate empires and inheritance battles. His role, heroic as it might have been, was essentially complete. Rebecca was safe. Emma was thriving. Justice was being served. His own life, with its more mundane concerns of rent and tuition, seemed distant and unconnected to this reality. Jamal, Rebecca's voice pulled him back. Where did you go just now? He turned, embarrassed. Just thinking about what comes next. For my grandmother and me. Rebecca studied him, then made a decision. Come here, she said, patting the edge of her bed. When he sat, she surprised him by placing Emma in his arms. The tiny weight of her was both terrifying and miraculous. 2 days ago, I thought we would both die, Rebecca said quietly. You saved us. Not once, but twice. That creates a bond nothing can break. Her eyes, so like her daughter's, held his firmly. The Thompson Foundation for Promising Youth needs a new director. Someone who understands struggle, values education, and has unimpeachable character. Jamal looked down at Emma, then back at Rebecca. I don't have any experience running a foundation. But you have. Experience doing what's right, no matter the cost. she smiled. Think about it. In the meantime, my legal team will be addressing your grandmother's medical needs and your educational prospects. Before Jamal could respond, Rodriguez's phone rang. Her expression darkened as she listened to the caller. When? She demanded. How many officers were? She cut herself off, aware of everyone watching. Keep me updated. Full tactical response authorized. She ended the call, her professional demeanor strained. Thomas Blackwood's transport vehicle was ambushed en route to the state detention center. 2 officers injured. Blackwood is missing. The fragile sense of safety that had begun to build shattered instantly. Harrison was already on his phone, arranging additional security for Rebecca and Emma. Andrea had gone pale, clutching her recording device like a talisman. He won't stop, Rebecca whispered, reaching for her daughter. Not until he gets what he wants. Rodriguez was already issuing orders for protective details and travel restrictions. In the midst of the sudden flurry of activity, Jamal held Emma for one moment longer, a silent promise passing between them before he returned her to her mother's arms. Through the hospital window, he noticed an unmarked black sedan pulling into a restricted parking space, 2 men in suits emerging with purposeful strides. One looked up, directly at the window where Jamal stood, and spoke into a radio clipped to his lapel. While everyone scrambled to respond to the news of Thomas's escape, Jamal noticed an official envelope that had been delivered with Rebecca's dinner tray. The hospital security seal had been broken, and the return address showed the state judicial offices. Without drawing attention, he slipped the envelope open. Inside was notification that Thomas had filed an emergency appeal, claiming evidence tampering and witness coercion, signed by a judge Jamal hadn't heard mentioned before. The autumn sun filtered through the oak trees lining the university campus, casting dappled shadows across Jamal's path as he hurried between classes. 2 years had transformed him from an overworked mechanic to a medical student with a purpose that went beyond mere survival. His white coat, still stiff with newness, hung over his arm as he navigated the crowded walkway, nodding to fellow students who called out greetings. His phone vibrated. Michael, now head nurse in the Thompson wing of University Medical Center. Don't forget dinner tonight, Michael's text read. Emma's been practicing her Jamal dance all morning. Smiling, Jamal typed a quick reply promising he wouldn't be late. These dinners had become a monthly tradition, a chance for all of them to remember how their lives had intertwined through crisis and emerged stronger on the other side. The trial of Thomas Blackwood had dominated headlines for months after his recapture. Found hiding in a private airfield trying to board a chartered flight to a non-extradition country, he had faced the full weight of state and federal justice. The recordings provided by Andrea, combined with the financial trail uncovered by forensic accountants, had revealed a pattern of fraud and manipulation dating back years before David's death. The courtroom scene remained vivid in Jamal's memory. Thomas's practiced charm crumbling under cross-examination. His desperation growing as witness after witness testified to his meticulous planning and callous disregard for human life. The chef who had prepared David's final meal described the unusual insistence by Thomas that he alone would serve his brother's plate. Dr. Chen detailed her suspicions and the pressure she'd faced to suppress them. When Rebecca took the stand, cradling Emma in her arms, her testimony had been devastating in its simple truth. He wanted control more than he wanted family. The verdict had been unanimous, guilty on all counts, including the first-degree murder of David Thompson. The odd sentence, life without possibility of parole. Jamal checked his watch and quickened his pace. Before dinner, he had promised to visit his grandmother at the specialized care facility that had become her home. Once a temporary refuge during the crisis, the Thompson Senior Care Center now provided her with the best medical attention available, her room overlooking gardens designed specifically for patients with respiratory conditions. "There's my favorite medical student," she called as he entered, her voice stronger than it had been in years. The new treatments funded by the Thompson Foundation had reversed some of the damage to her lungs, giving her a quality of life she hadn't experienced in decades. "How are you feeling today, Grandma?" He bent to kiss her cheek, noting with satisfaction the healthy color there. "Well enough to beat Mrs. Chen at Mahjong 3 times this morning." She patted his hand. "Now tell me about your classes. Still top of your biochemistry group?" They chatted comfortably, Jamal sharing stories from his medical training while she updated him on the facility gossip. Who was sweet on whom among the staff, which resident had smuggled in contraband snacks, whose grandchildren had visited the previous weekend. "And how is little Emma?" she asked eventually, as she always did. "Growing like a weed. She'll be 2 next month." His grandmother's eyes twinkled. "And Rebecca? Still running that empire of hers?" "And revolutionizing it," Jamal confirmed. The Thompson Group's new focus on sustainable shipping and ethical labor practices is changing the whole industry. His grandmother studied him with the knowing look that had intimidated him as a child. "And when are you going to admit there's more than friendship between you two?" Jamal felt heat rising in his cheeks. "It's complicated, Grandma. She's my boss, technically, and after everything she's been through." "Life is always complicated, child. Doesn't mean you put happiness on hold." She squeezed his hand. "That woman looks at you like you hung the moon, and I've seen how you watch her when you think no one's looking." Before Jamal could formulate a response, his phone chimed with a reminder. "I have to go. Dinner tonight." "Go on then." She shooed him with a wave. "Tell Rebecca I'm expecting both of you for Sunday lunch this week, and bring that baby. She brightens this old place up." The Thompson estate sat on 10 manicured acres overlooking the city, its imposing facade softened by the climbing roses Rebecca had planted shortly after taking full possession. The security gate recognized Jamal's car, swinging open automatically as he approached. Where once the mansion had felt cold and museum-like under Thomas's influence, Rebecca had transformed it into a true home. Children's toys decorated the formerly austere living room, family photos lined the hallways, and the scent of home cooking had replaced the sterile perfection Thomas had demanded. "Uncle Jamal!" Emma's delighted squeal greeted him as he entered. The toddler barreled into his legs, arms raised in the universal childhood demand to be picked up. "There's my favorite scientist," he laughed, swinging her into his arms. At not quite 2, Emma Thompson had her mother's striking blue eyes and determination, along with an insatiable curiosity that kept everyone on their toes. "I made fire," she announced proudly. Rebecca appeared from the kitchen, an apron protecting her silk blouse. "She helped light the candles for the cake," she clarified hurriedly. "With supervision." "Lots of supervision," Michael confirmed, following behind with a glass of wine in each hand. He passed one to Jamal with a knowing smile. "Emma's been talking about you all day." "Fire," Emma repeated, pointing toward the dining room where Professor Harrison was setting the table, his once shocking white hair now more silver than snow, but his eyes still sharp behind his glasses. "Indeed, young lady, combustion is a fascinating chemical process," Harrison agreed, adjusting his signature ugly sweater, now a running joke among their makeshift family. "Perhaps Jamal can explain the scientific principles involved." "Perhaps after dinner," Rebecca suggested, rescuing Jamal from an impromptu lecture. "Andrea and Sophia should be here any minute." The gathering that evening was more festive than usual. Andrea, now running the Thompson Foundation's outreach programs, had secured major funding for scholarships aimed at students from underserved communities. Sophia, who had reconnected with Michael during the trial, had recently been promoted to director of nursing. Harrison continued teaching part-time, while also serving on the state's Judicial Ethics Committee, a position he used to ensure that what happened to Jamal could never happen to another innocent person. As they settled around the dining table, Emma insisted on sitting beside her Jamal, chattering about her day at preschool and the experiments her teacher had allowed the children to conduct with water and food coloring. "She's already talking about becoming a doctor," Rebecca said, pride evident in her voice. "I wonder where she gets that idea." "Clearly Harrison's influence," Michael joked, earning a mock-indignant huff from the professor. Later, after Emma had been put to bed with multiple bedtime stories and solemn promises that Jamal would still be there when she woke up, the adults gathered on the terrace overlooking the city lights. The conversation turned, as it occasionally did, to the events that had brought them all together. "I saw on the news that Thomas's final appeal was denied," Andrea mentioned. "The Supreme Court refused to hear the case." "Good," Sophia said firmly. "After what he put all of you through, he deserves to spend every minute of his life behind bars." Rebecca sipped her wine thoughtfully. "Sometimes I still have nightmares about it. Not just what he did, but how close he came to succeeding. If Jamal hadn't been driving by at that exact moment. If Michael hadn't questioned the husband story," Jamal added. "If Andrea hadn't started recording meetings," Harrison continued. "A constellation of choices and chances," Rebecca said softly. "All leading to this moment, this life." As the others drifted into conversation about the Foundation's next project, Rebecca touched Jamal's arm. "Walk with me? The gardens are beautiful this time of evening." They strolled in companionable silence through paths lined with lavender and rosemary, the night air cool but not uncomfortable. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, far more visible here than in the city apartment where Jamal had once struggled to make ends meet. "I never properly thanked you," Rebecca said suddenly. "You've thanked me 1,000 times. The scholarship, my grandmother's care." "Those aren't thanks," she interrupted. "Those are just decent human responses to someone who saved my life. Twice." She stopped walking, turning to face him directly. "I'm talking about everything that came after. Testifying at the trial even when Thomas's lawyers tried to destroy your character. Helping me rebuild the company's ethical framework. Being there for Emma as she grows." Jamal met her gaze, seeing in it the same strength that had enabled her to survive Thomas's machinations. "You would have done the same." "Perhaps," she smiled. "But that's not the point." She gestured toward the house, where laughter drifted from the terrace. "Look at what grew from that terrible time. A family formed not by blood but by choice. A foundation helping hundreds of students who would otherwise have no chance at higher education. A company transformed from profit at all costs to a model of corporate responsibility." "You did all that," Jamal said. "I just pulled you from a car." Rebecca shook her head. "When that car exploded, I thought it was the end. I never imagined it would be the beginning of something so important." Jamal smiled, remembering his hesitation before signing Thomas's contract 2 years earlier. "I guess heroism isn't just that moment of running toward the fire, but all the small decisions we make afterward." "Speaking of fire," Rebecca laughed, pointing back toward the house where Emma had somehow escaped bedtime and was attempting to reach the cake's candles, while Andrea distracted Sophia and Michael tried to intervene. "It looks like we have another blaze to extinguish." As they hurried back to the terrace, Jamal caught sight of an official-looking envelope lying on Rebecca's desk through the study window. It bore the seal of the State Department of Corrections, likely another notification about Thomas's denied appeal, or perhaps a parole hearing that would inevitably reject any early release. While everyone sang happy birthday for Emma's impromptu celebration, Jamal noticed the official envelope on top of Rebecca's desk. It was the notification that Thomas had filed for another appeal, a reminder that vigilance and courage needed to remain constant even in moments of joy.